June. First day of June. Feast of St. Gwen of Brittany, who had 3 breasts. Odd William has returned. He says the miraculous Hebrew the villagers spoke was but gibberish, the product of a brain fever or an overactive imagination. Gone are William's hopes for greatness. He is standing again, his back to our fire, writing of the founding of Rome by twin orphans nursed by a wolf. Second day of June. Feast of St. Marcellinus and Peter, Christian martyrs who converted their jailer while in prison. There was a message from Robert. His wife has died with as little fuss as she lived. I never once called her by name. It was Agnes. The child died too. It had no name. Strange things are happening to me. I am having so many soft feelings. Mayhap I need to brew me some wormwood and periwinkle to comfort my heart. Third day of June. Whitsunday, and the feast of St. Kevin, who lived on salmon brought to him by an otter and died at 120. We dressed all in green and yellow to celebrate Whit Day, and sang Summer is a-comin' in, although it was so cold and rainy that the dancers fought to wear the tree costumes, which are clumsy but warm, and all were wet and bedraggled. We were happy to think on the church ale to come. Fourth day of June. Feast of St. Edfrith, scribe and artist like me. Quiet today. I am sore of head and sour of stomach, but warm. Fifth day of June. Feast of St. Boniface, who wrote the first Latin grammar used in England. I helped an aunt today. She carried a burden so heavy it looked to crush her. A crumb it was, or a speck of wheat, or a drop of honey that had hardened in the sun. She was struggling to take it back to her nest where it would feed her fellow ants for a day or a week, as small as it was. So intent was she on carrying her crumb that she didn't notice me at all. I watched as she staggered and fell and bumped and stumbled, making slow progress toward what must have been her home. But day was nearly over. I knew the villagers would be driving their animals back through the meadow to pen them for the night, and the tiny ant and her precious crumb would be smashed into the dirt. I had to help her. First, I searched around for other ants to see where they were going. I followed a line of ants running to and from a hole in the dirt, some in, some out, some sideways, all around the hole. This must be home, I thought. I put a piece of leaf in front of the ant. All intent on her burden and unaware of me, she walked onto the leaf. Then I went to the hole in the dirt where all the ant activity was. It was only a few steps for me, but seemed a lifetime's journey for an ant. I put the leaf down by the hole. The ant walked around the leaf, up the stem and down the side, stumbled around in circles for a bit, twitched her feelers like my brother Robert hitching up his breeches, and walked down the ant hole, still balancing her morsel. I felt as though I had saved the whole world. Sixth day of June. Feasts of St. Goodwill, Jarlath, Norbert, Agaberd, Artemius, Candida, and Pauline. Truly, I am not making this up. The beast, my father, woke up roaring like a real beast this morning. Toothache. He rubbed garlic on his thumb and left the smelly paste there all day, but that reliable remedy failed him. He roars that he will go to Lincoln to the tooth puller, but my mother is afraid that pulling the tooth will leave a hole in his head where evil spirits can get into his body. I think it is more likely that evil spirits could get out. Eighth day of June. Feast of St. William of York, at whom my great-great-great-great-grandmother once threw a cabbage. My mother convinced the beast to send to the abbey for the Spanish physician. She thinks mayhap he can cure my father's toothache without leaving a hole. 11th day of June. Feast of St. Barnabas, the first missionary. 2 days ago, the Spanish physician was here. He told my father that the toothache is due to an imbalance of humors in his body, and recommended letting out some excess blood by cutting a vein under his tongue. The beast submitted meekly, or him, until the knife pierced his tongue. He swung out and knocked the little man from Spain from his stool. Finally, the physician managed to cut the vein and caught the heavy dark blood in a cooking pot. But today the beast still roared, so the physician returned. The toothache, it seems, comes not from unbalanced humors, but from a toothworm, which has burrowed deep into my father's jaw. This new cause required a new remedy, so the physician mixed henbane leaves with sheep fat, rolled this into little pellets, and dropped them on the fire. My father leaned over and breathed in the smoke through his mouth. Sparks kept leaping up and starting his beard on fire. He looked like a demon from the mouth of hell, smoldering and bellowing. I went outside and helped Meg make cheese. 13th day of June. Feast of St. Antony of Padua, who once preached to fish. We go today to Lincoln to the tooth puller. The physician came again yesterday, escorted by 6 of my father's men. He told my father that this toothworm was especially stubborn and malignant, and that nothing would do but a poultice of raven manure on the sore tooth. I saw the little man running, robes pulled up over hairy, skinny legs, followed by my father's roar, and not even his 6 escorts could bring him back. Morwenna convinced my mother that we need new embroidery silks that none but she and I could select. So we go too. It is Corpus Christi week, and on Thursday the guilds of Lincoln will deck their wagons with flowers and herbs and pull them through the town to the cathedral square, where they will perform their plays about the wonders of creation and the life of Jesus, and I will be there to see. God keep Morwenna. 19th day of June, Feast of Saints Gervase and Protace, whose relics restored the sight of a blind butcher in Milan. Corpus bones! Since last I wrote, I have seen heaven and hell, angels and devils, and the tortures of the damned. I must be changed. We rode to Lincoln in a fine drizzle, but the city atop its hill was bathed in sunshine. From our room in the inn, I could hear the sharp cracking of horses' hooves on cobblestone, the cries of merchants and peddlers, the cook boys calling, "Hot pies! Fat pigs and geese, come and eat!" and the incredible noise of too many people in too small a space. Lincoln is wondrous fair and curious. On our way to the tooth puller, we walked streets so steep a fat bishop pushed from the top, would not stop rolling until he reached the River Trent. On either side were merchants' booths with wares spread out upon the counters: cloth, ribbons, candles, needles, boots, belts, spoons, knives, arrowheads, and more. Above the shops, the second stories leaned so far over the street that Mistress A could pass a sausage to Mistress B across the road without leaving her house. The crowded city swarmed with dogs, cats, roosters, geese, pigs, horses, merchants, travelers, housewives hurrying to market, children running with their buckets to the well, serving maids emptying chamber pots, and all manner of busy, bustling creatures. Near the market square we passed a man with his head and hands held tight in stocks, being pulled through the streets in a wagon. Caught selling spoiled fish, he had some of his stinking goods hung round his neck like a necklace, and the wagon was followed by hundreds of cats, hungry and hoping. Children and even some vengeful housewives followed along, throwing sticks and mud and garbage at the wagon. One old woman threw rotten carrots and onions, while another gathered them up in her apron and hurried off to make soup. When we reached the tooth puller, the beast roared again, but the tooth is now out. His jaw is black and swollen. I thought perhaps my mother was right and evil spirits had entered. But he roars no louder and swears no more, and stinks no worse, so mayhap all is well. The next day being Corpus Christi, we heard Mass and then followed a procession of priests and merchants into the cathedral yard to see them play the story of the Last Judgment. A two-tiered wagon held heaven on its upper story and earth below. At the side was the mouth of hell, smoke and flames belching out, and the awful cries of the damned suffering every kind of beating, roasting, and grilling. I hoped to have nightmares from this for months. Heaven was remarkably crowded, considering how few people we are told are good enough to get there. Angels with golden skin and golden wings flew about on golden straps, playing on golden harps. One angel caught on the branches of an apple tree. The angel struggled and cursed devilish curses, but finally climbed down unhurt, and the play went on, with God and the saints singing and dancing and blowing on golden horns, calling each man to answer for his deeds. Below on earth, demons bristling with horned horsehair masks tried to drag sinners into the mouth of hell, while behind their backs the Virgin Mary pulled the poor souls out of the hellfire with her own hands. Then the devil himself appeared, hoofed, horned, and tailed, clad in a wolfskin, bedecked in bells, shaggy and awful and smelling like last week's herring. In a deep ringing voice he called, "Foul-tempered wives who cause men to grieve, murderers, thieves, my welcome receive." If he had called for disobedient daughters, I think I would have repented my sins and cried for mercy right there in the cathedral yard. One clumsy devil knocked over the ladder to heaven, smashing it to bits and stranding players up above. While someone built another, God and the angels entertained us with songs and bawdy stories. Then the new ladder went up. We all cheered. God came down waving to the audience, and the play was over. 20th day of June. Feast of St. Alban, beheaded by a soldier whose eyes then fell out. St. Alban is buried near here, at St. Albans. We returned in the midst of furious house cleaning. The courtyard and the orchard were bedecked with wet linen, hanging from ropes and walls and trees, while kettles bubbled with strong-smelling soapy water. Tonight my body will rejoice. Clean linen! Home can never match the excitement of Lincoln, but I was happy to see my mother again. She is well, and the babe she carries too, God save us all. 21st day of June. Feast of St. Lufrid, 48 years an abbot. Old Tam, the father of Meg from the dairy, finally has 3 pigs, so Meg will marry Thomas Baker's oldest son, Alf, as soon as they have a cottage. Alf is puny and sneezes all summer, but still, I would be Meg, about to marry the choice of my heart, rather than the Lady Catherine, promised to a pig. I am desolate. 22nd day of June. Feast of St. Ebb the Younger, who cut off her nose to protect her virtue from marauding Danes. This afternoon was flea catching. I spread a white cloth on each bed so even my weak eyes could see the little black fleas as they jumped. I then caught each one and crushed it between my finger and thumb. It is tedious and leaves me bumpy and red with bites, but does not overvex my brain, so I can think and wonder while I work. Today I thought about ways the shaggy-bearded oaf who wishes to marry me might die and leave me free. He might be eaten by wolves, or struck by lightning, or explode from eating too much. He might encounter a dragon bigger and meaner and more evil even than he, or be disemboweled by a Turk or a jealous husband. Mayhap all his teeth will fall out, and he will be unable to eat, and so will starve to death. Or he might jump off a roof in a drunk, thinking he could fly. He could be run over by a peddler's wagon full of heavy iron pots, or have corrupt and rotten ulcers eat away his body. I could put deadly thornapple or monkshood in his soup, or train my birds to fly north and peck him to death. Or a giant hand might reach down and pinch him between its thumb and finger. Life is full of possibilities. If only something would happen soon. 23rd day of June, Midsummer Eve, and feast of St. Ethelreda, who died of a tumor on her neck, divine punishment for her vanity in wearing necklaces in her younger days. All of the world is celebrating Midsummer Eve, eating and drinking and dancing in the fields. I cannot, filled as I am with dread over this marriage business. If only the bonfires lit throughout this shire this night to drive demons and dragons away would drive unwelcome suitors away as well. I am going to bed with the sounds of singing in my ears, but not in my heart. 24th day of June, Midsummer Day and Feast of St. John the Baptist, our Lord's cousin, whose head King Herod gave to Salome as a reward for her dancing. Where will next Midsummer Day find me? 25th day of June, Feast of Adalbert of Egmond, about whom we know nothing but who works miracles at his tomb. Last night, Ralph Littlemouse dreamed he saw Perkins' granny sitting by the side of the road with blood on her clothes. This morning he ran to her cottage, but she was already dead. He thinks she must have been elf-shot, for there are no marks on her, so we are all carrying bread in our pockets to protect us from the fairies. Glenna Cotter and Thomas Baker's wife Anne washed and dressed the old woman, and laid her on the table in their cottage. Tonight all the villagers will watch. I do not know why they call it watching when it is really singing and games and drinking, but at least she will not be alone. They have sent to the high meadow for Perkin to come home. My heart breaks for him. 26th day of June, Feast of St. John and Paul, Roman martyrs who were buried in their garden. We took Perkins' granny from her cottage to the church in the dark, although I could see a sliver of silver light to the east and knew dawn would soon be upon us. Father Hugh said mass and a lot of things about sinners and hellfire, and how this should be a mirror to us all, for we all shall die and none know when, but nothing about how she had the merriest eyes I ever saw, or how although she was no bigger than Ralph Littlemouse's youngest, she always had a lap big enough for a crying child, or how she made the best soul cakes in the village. I tried to convince Perkin to sleep in our hall tonight, but he said no. He will spread his bed by the fire in his granny's cottage, as he always does when he is not in the high meadow with the goats, and will do so every night until he leaves to be a scholar. 27th day of June, Feast of St. Cyril of Alexandria, fierce enemy of the Novatians, Neoplatonists, Nestorians, and the imperial governor Orestes. Before light this day, I awoke with an inspired notion. I slipped out of my bed and into my clothes, and was at the dairy before light. Meg was already there, trying to coax milk from an unwilling cow. Meg, I have an inspired notion, I said. You and Alf need a cottage. Perkins' granny does not. I think God sent Perkins' granny's cottage to you. Meg's eyes lit, as though I had set a torchlight to them. A cottage, she sighed. Married, she sighed. Me and Alf, she sighed. We jumped around the dairy a bit, and then Meg stopped, biting her lip and scowling. Your father, my lady. Would he? Could we? Could you? I know what she was trying to ask. While Meg finished coaxing the cows, I went to coax my father. I found him in the hall with his breakfast bread and ale, frowning at the snoring lump that was odd William, lying between himself and the warmth of the fire. Sir, said I, the morning dawns fair. I hope it finds you well. Slurp, said my father. For certain, I continued, Perkins' granny is in heaven this day, watching over us all. I know God would want her with him, so good she was and so generous. God ever rewards the generous. Slurp, said my father again. Generous as she was, I know Perkins' granny would want to share what she had with those of us left behind. Her warmest mantle with the miller's wife, her extra stockings with Ann Baker, and, I said, taking a big breath, her empty cottage with young about to weds who have none of their own. My father stopped in mid-slurp. His brain woke up. He understood. Greed blossomed in his tiny eyes, and he bargained with me for the cottage. Finally, he agreed to let Meg and Alf have it in exchange for one of Meg's dowry pigs and my willingness to consider the Shaggy Beard marriage. So I told Meg, and Meg told Alf, and they will be married on Sunday and at Perkin's granny's cottage. Perkin will still have his bed by the fire when he is not in the high meadow with the goats, and someone to see he eats a hot meal on cold days. And his granny in heaven will smile at me, and all will be well. 28th day of June, St. Peter's Eve and Feast of the Martyrs, St. Potamania, who had boiling pitch poured over her body, and St. Basilides, a soldier who was kind to her. I had good reason to hide from Morwenna today, for I had the notion to make a picture for Perkin of his granny in heaven, and did not wish to be stopped and made to sew or weave or practice walking with my eyes down. I used my best inks and brushes and a whole sheet of vellum taken by night from the stack William Stewart uses for the household accounts. In my picture the sun shines, for Perkin's granny suffered greatly from the cold. She is gaily dressed in a new green kirtle and dances in a meadow with Perkin and goats, for I think heaven would be no heaven for either of them without goats. She is smiling and has all her teeth. Perkin leaves in 2 days to return to the high meadow, so I will leave the picture in the cottage where he will be sure to find it. 30th day of June, Feast of St. Theobald of Provins, hermit, patron of charcoal burners. Perkin is gone, but first brought to me his thanks, his granny's earthenware cup, and a kiss. My insides are very warm, although the morning is cool.